Hello everyone, welcome back to my session. Today we are going to learn another kind of attributive clause, that is the non-restrictive attributive clause. Before we get into the new lesson, I'd like to recap what we have learned in the last lesson. We have learned some key terms such as the antecedent, relative pronouns, or relative adverbs, and some general rules about the restrictive clause clarified. But we won't talk it in detail due to the time limitation. So we jump to the topic, that is non-restrictive attributive clause. 根据定语从句先行词之间的关系紧密程度，可以将定语从句分为限制性从句和非限制性定语从句。The definition of non-restrictive attributive clause is that it acts as the function of complement or explanation for the antecedent or the main sentence, and it can be withdrawn with no effect on the meaning of the whole sentence. It should be noticed that there is a comma at the beginning of the clause to separate the antecedent and the clause. If the clause is in the middle of the sentence, commas are needed. For example, Tommy's father, who is over 60, still works hard day and night, which means, 汤姆的父亲现在已经超过60岁了，但是还是每天没日没夜的努力工作。In this sentence, there are two commas, and the relative pronoun who act as the subject in the clause, and it indicates the antecedent, Tom's father. So as you can see, the clause is kind of explanation or complement to the background information about Tom's father. From the clause, we know that his father is over 60. As we have introduced these key terms before, so we will briefly discuss these key terms with noticing to some differences. For example, the antecedent. In non-attributive restrictive in non-restrictive attributive clause, the whole main sentence can be the antecedent. This is a little bit different from the restrictive attributive clause. As whose antecedents include nouns or pronouns. And the relative pronouns of the non-restrictive attributive clause, including who, whom, whose, which, as. They are the same as the restrictive clause. And the relative adverbs are the same to the restrictive clause, which are when, where, and why. So at first, we need to know some key features of a non-restrictive clause. Firstly, when the main sentence as the antecedent. For example, she said she had finished her work, which I doubt very much. In this sentence, which is to indicate the main sentence, that she said she had finished her work, and there is a comma before the relative pronoun, and which acts as the object of doubted. The sentence means 他说他已经把他工作全部都完成了，这件事情我非常的怀疑。Secondly, when the antecedent indicates the extraordinary things in the word or proper nouns, you can use a non-restrictive clause. For example, the moon, which is 384,400 kilometers away from the Earth, creates many beautiful stories. In this sentence, the antecedent is the moon. The moon is the only thing in the world, so we can use non-restrictive clause to create a sentence to express it. The sentence means 月亮它离地球有38.400千米，离地球这么远，然后呢，创造了很多美丽的故事。Thirdly, when the antecedent indicates one of someone's own relatives, 也就是当这个先行词指的是某一个人独有的亲戚的时候。For example, my father, who is an excellent violinist, is giving a concert next month, which means 我的父亲是一个出色的小提琴家，将会在下个月举办一场音乐会。It's obvious that the father is to the author's father. It cannot be our father. So in this situation, the author is able to use a non-restrictive clause to depict his father's experience. Fourthly, when there is noun or numeral or pronoun plus a preposition plus a relative pronoun. Okay, in this form, we can use a non-restrictive clause. For instance, I have 3 foreign teachers, 2 of whom are from Canada. As we were known, without the non-restrictive clause, we can still understand the main sentence. In the given example, we know that the author has 3 foreign teachers. But when the author adds the clause, we know more details about his or her teachers. That 2 of them are from Canada. So the clause works as a complement or explanation for the main sentence. So we need to know the differences between restrictive clause and non-restrictive clause. First, their relationship with the antecedent. For restrictive clause, the relationship is close, and the restrictive clause cannot be deleted as the sentence meaning will change. And the relationship with the antecedent for non-restrictive clause is loose because it can be deleted as the sentence meaning won't change. Just now we had explained it. Okay, and the necessity of commas. Restrictive clause can exist without commas, but non-restrictive clause should exist with commas. And thirdly, the usage of that in restrictive clause. That can be used, but in non-restrictive clauses, they cannot be used. Fourthly, when which or who acts as the object, whether they can be omitted in the clauses. for restrictive clauses, the answer is yes, while it is no for non-restrictive clauses. The next one is if whom can be replaced by that or who in the clause when it acts as the object. The answer for restrictive clause is yes, while it is no for non-restrictive clause. In the following, the difference is talking about whether they can be used to modify the main sentence. There is a definite no for restrictive clause, and it is definitely yes for non-restrictive clauses. However, there should be a comment or comments, and the non-restrictive clause should be led by which or as in order to modify the main sentence. And the last difference between restrictive clauses and non-restrictive clauses is that whether it should postpone when read these sentences, and the differences when they are translated into Chinese. For restrictive clauses, the readers don't need to stop when they read out the sentences, and these restrictive clauses should be interpreted as the attributive for the antecedents, and the reader should stop when they read non-restrictive clauses with using a falling tone, and non-restrictive clauses are usually interpreted as parallel sentences in Chinese. So in the following content, we need to focus on the attributive clause with special forms. First one is disjunctive attributive clause. That is to say, 所谓分隔式定语从句是指为了某种特殊的需要与先行词分开的定语从句。That is for some special needs. The attributive clause should be separated from the antecedent. For example, I have a picture by a famous painter, which was sent to me for my birthday. In this example, you can see that the antecedent picture and the relative pronoun which are separated by a preposition phrase that is by a famous painter, but actually it won't hinder us from understanding the whole sentence. The sentence means 我有一个来自一个非常著名画家的图片，然后呢，这个图片呢，就是在我的生日的时候被送给我的一张来自于著名画家的一个图片。Okay, next one is hybrid attributive clause. Sometimes the relatives of attributive clauses and the word behind it, there will be some expressions like I think, I believe, I just, I guess, I'm sure. They are these words can make the attributive clauses more complex. So in general, we address this kind of attributive clauses as hybrid attributive clauses. For example, James is the only one who will expect will win. as you can see, we expect is a kind of inserted words that won't stop us from understanding the clause. And the clause led by who is to modify the only one. The sentence means 詹姆士是我们希望会赢的那个唯一的一个人。Next one is multiple attributive clause. When the antecedent is modified by two or more attributive clauses, we address this kind of attributive clause as multiple attributive clause. For instance, I find it hard to leave the land where I have lived for 30 years and where there are sweet memories of my childhood. You can see there are two attributive clauses which are both led by where. We need to pay attention to the second and the following relative pronouns of the attributive clauses cannot be omitted. Otherwise, it may generate misunderstandings. For example, it happened in one of those colorful Danish inns which offer service especially for tourists and where English is spoken. So if we delete the relative pronoun where as the second one, the meaning of the whole sentence will change. Okay, next one is elliptical attributive clause. For some attributive clauses, with no misunderstanding, some elements can be deleted. Then they can be changed into preposition plus relative pronouns plus to. In this form, in order to make the sentence more simple. For example, I have saved a sum of money with which I'd like to buy a new computer for myself. In this sentence, we can delete I'd like. Therefore, it's just to buy a new computer for myself is left with the attributive clause. And we can understand the sentence. The sentence means 我已经节省了一些钱，然后我可以用这些钱为我自己买一台新的电脑。Okay. The note is that in this kind of elliptical attributive clause, the subject of the main sentence must coincide with the logical subject of the to form. Otherwise, it cannot be changed into this kind of attributive clause. For example, I was trying to find a place in which my brother could live. It's different from I was trying to find a place in which to live. They hold different meanings. There are some important notes for the attributive clause. The first thing is subject-predicate consistency, that is 主谓一致。关系代词在定语从句中做主语时，定语从句中谓语动词的形式取决于先行词。先行词是单数时，从句的谓语动词用单数形式；先行词是复数时，从句的谓语动词用复数形式。That is to say, when the antecedent in the attributive clause acts as the subject, the form of a predicate should depend on the antecedent. If the antecedent is single form, the predict should be single. If the antecedent is plural, the form of predict should also be plural. For example, Mr. Smith, who is now downstairs, is asking you to see you. As you can see, Mr. Smith is a single person, so the predicate of the relative pronoun who is. And the second example is the Smiths who are now downstairs are asking to see you. The Smith means the families of Mr. Smith. It's definitely more than one person. So the predicate predicate form of should be plural. Secondly, 定语从句前为 one of 加上可数名词复数，形式是关系代词做主语。谓语动词要用复数形式。定语从句前是 the only one of 加上可数名词复数，形式是关系代词作为主语。谓语动词要用单数形式。For example, Jeff is one of the students who were awarded, which means 杰夫就是所有学生所有被奖励的学生当中的一员。And the second example is Jeff is the only one of the students who was awarded, which means 杰夫就是所有学生当中唯一一个被奖励的人。By providing explanations, we can know that these two sentences hold different meanings. The formal focuses on a group, while the later concentrates on only one person. So the forms of predicates are different. Thirdly, using that instead of which. That or which act as the subject of or the object in attributive clause to indicate something when acting as object. They can be omitted. In general, they can replace each other except following conditions. First, when the antecedent is an indefinite pronoun or modified by it. Second, when the antecedent is and act as the predicative in the clause. Thirdly, when here, there, or which act as the subject in the main sentence. Fourth, when the antecedent is modified by the only, the same, the very, the last, or etc. Here is a special example. You are the last person that I want to see, which means 你是我最不想见到的人。So in this sentence, the last person is not mean is not to say that you are the last one to come to some places. It doesn't indicate the sequence is about a subject. It's more about a subjective opinion. Like I don't want to see you. Fifth, when the antecedent is ordinal numeral, the superlative degree of adjective, or it is modified by them. For example, this is the best film that I've ever seen, which means 这是我看过最好的电影。Six, when the antecedent indicates both someone and something. For example, she took photographs of the things and people that she was interested in. So in this condition, the relative pronoun should always be that instead of which. Another condition, using which instead of that. First, when it needs a non-restrictive clause. Secondly, when it is associated with and behind a preposition. And we also have some conditions in which we use who instead of that. When the antecedent indicates a person or people, the relative pronoun can be either who or that. But who can be the predicative in the clause, and that cannot need a non-restrictive clause. Firstly, when the antecedent indicates ones or those, maybe just someone. In this case, who should be used instead of that, because they are because of infinite indications. Secondly, in existential sentence, that is, there be form when the relative pronoun as the subject to indicate someone. For example, there are many young men who are against him. In this situation, that cannot be used. Thirdly, when the antecedent is attached with a non-positive preposition, for example, the boy was crying hard who lost his way while looking for his mother. The non-positive preposition is was crying hard, and the clause begins with who, until his mother. Okay, fourthly, when there are two attributive clauses, two relative pronouns including indicating someone, one use that and another use who. For example, the student that was praised at yesterday's meeting is the monitor who is very modest and works very hard. The reason why we use two different relative pronouns to indicate people, because each of them is to indicate a person who is another person to the rest of one. They are two persons. So next one is the condition using that instead of whom. Firstly, when who needs the main sentence, that is a special question, we use that instead of who. Secondly, when the antecedent is modified by the same, the superlative degree, the ordinal numeral, or the last, the only, or etc. And sometimes we just use as or which to need the non-restrictive clause. When as or which needs a non-restrictive clause, the antecedent can be the main sentence to indicate something included in the context. However, the meanings, semiotics, and usages are different. Firstly, the attributive clause led by as suggests the view, attitude, explanation, or comment of the speaker. For example, he is very patient, as is showing in her work. From this sentence, we can tell that as is to express the author's attitude or comment towards the person that works very hard, works very patiently in her work. Secondly, the attributive clause led by as can place at the beginning, middle, or end of the sentence, which, while it is led by which, can only be placed at the end. That is to say, the place of the clause led by as is more flexible than that of which. Thirdly, the non-attributive clause led by which complements or explains the thing stated by the main sentences, and it suggests the existence of the thing or the result arising from the thing. For example, the boy had a fever every night, which worried his parents very much. It just says the boy's illness about fever and his patients to worry about his disease. Fourthly, in semiotics, which can be the subject of a notional verb, then the relationship between the attributive clause and the main sentences is usually consultation, consultation, or correlative. I bought, for instance, I bought my sister a big toy which delighted her greatly. Is equal to I bought my sister a big toy, and that works as a pronoun which is equal to the thing. By the way, delighted her greatly. Fifthly, when the copula be can be omitted in the non-attributive clause, which should be used otherwise as should be used. For example, Jane told me she won the match, which was a lie. In this situation, the clause was led by which, therefore, the predicate words cannot be omitted. In the second example, as was planned, we met at the airport. In this condition, words can be omitted because of s. Sixthly, when there is the negative form of the predicate, or when there are complex objects behind the predicate in the clause, which is generally led by which rather than as. For example, you pretend not to know me, which I don't understand. In this sentence, the predicate is in negative form, and the clause is led by which as a result. So the last feature is the same as or that, such as or that. These two forms. Firstly, the attributive clause with the form of the same as pays attention to the similarity between two things or two people, while the attributive clause with the form of the same that emphasize one thing or one person. For example, I bought the same dictionary as you bought, which means 我买了一本和你一样的字典. And the second sentence is I met the same person that I saw yesterday, which means 我遇见了昨天看见的那个人. In the first sentence, it put more emphasis on the similarity, while in the second sentence, they also emphasize the same thing, you know. Secondly, the as in the form of such as needs an attributive clause, and it acts as a subject, object, or etc. While the that in the form of such that needs an adverbial clause of result. For example, they had such a fierce dog as I had ever seen. This is a restrictive clause, and as acts as the object of thing. While the second sentence is they had such a fierce dog that no one dared to go near their house, which is an adverbial clause of a result that has no meaning. This is today's lesson. Thank you. Hope you enjoy the video, and